Play stupid games, Confederacy? Lose not-so-stupid prizes. Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the series of respiratory infections, this is the not producing 3 regularly scheduled episodes of your podcast and leading listeners that don't follow you on Facebook to believe that you've hung it up. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm still Brian Powers. Warwick, Crenshaw, Hiawatha, Briante. Those 4 words almost form a code that describes a critical turning point in American history. Those 4 words might have cost us the entire Civil War, and it's difficult to fathom just how close they came to doing so. It's a drama that began on the seas, but the most explosive climax occurred at the Supreme Court, and it still affects us today. Abraham Lincoln, heard of him, faced a momentous choice. After shots were fired at Fort Sumter, and it was clear that we were now at war with, and put a pin in this, essentially ourselves, the usual way to deal with such hostilities from a political and legal perspective seemed quaint and outdated just under 75 years into the government's existence. So you have a breakaway region forming an army and engaging in open warfare on you. How do you approach it? Should you go to Congress and declare war? Should you treat it instead as an insurrection? It may seem clear with roughly 165 years of hindsight, but it wasn't nearly as obvious in the thick of it. The problem is the Constitution. The framers did the best they could, but they lacked foresight. Warfare? Despite plenty of evidence to the contrary throughout all of human history, they assumed that actual warfare would take place by governments through official declarations. So they put the power to declare war in the hands of Congress, and then just figured that was that. That takes care of everything. Here now, though, was a conundrum. If Congress declared war, who would be the country to declare war on? You can't say you're fighting to preserve your union if you recognize a part of that union as a separate and legitimate foreign country. That was the issue Lincoln faced. If he recognized the Confederacy through a formal declaration of war, it would legitimize them as a nation, and that formality would bolster them in their efforts to enter into agreements with foreign nations for assistance. On the other hand, there were legal rules to armed engagements recognized the world over, and these rules were also recognized in American law. Either way, Lincoln's hands were tied. So, did he take option A and declare war, or did he take option B and abide by legal constraints generally? Our man recognized that both options sucked, and he took option C. That's S-E-A-C. What Lincoln did was, essentially, illegalish under the current understanding of the law at the time. He set up blockades of southern ports to capture Confederate ships. Because most of the agrarian South was under-industrialized, to be able to keep their economy afloat, southern agricultural producers had to export their products for processing and sale. Without direct access to northern markets anymore, they had to send all of this out via ship, and the ports were busy with ships from the north bringing supplies and others loaded with goods to head out to reach more distant locations. Lincoln, and really his master strategist Winfield Scott, believed that a blockade of southern ports would cut off a vital source of southern income, which would slowly starve the Confederate machine when it couldn't get its cotton and tobacco to Europe in place of the trade it used to have with the North. So here comes the law. If you were a nation, you don't blockade your own ports. You close them because they're yours. If you blockade hostile ports, you're acknowledging that they are the property of a foreign belligerent and not instead merely held by insurrectionists. In other words, you can't have it both ways. A blockade isn't just a net that stops ship from passing. It's a naval trap that seizes the ships coming in and out of the ports. So why is the decision to institute a blockade important? because seizing ships during wartime is legal, and captured ships are considered prizes. There was a whole system set up to verify prizes and claims to the ships and goods therein, all based in admiralty law. If you capture a ship and it's not wartime, well, legally you're just a pirate. And that's not good when you need as much legal authority on your side as possible. So, President Abraham Lincoln or Captain Abe, Pirate King, far scar and 7 years ago. Actually, that's kind of cool. Lincoln would have been a cool pirate. Growing the beard got him halfway there already. But there's even more nuance. See, Lincoln didn't want to declare war against the Confederacy, but he did want to treat the Confederate soldiers as full belligerents instead of just members of an insurgency or just traitors. By doing so, this would give them more rights and better treatment. Just kind of a head scratcher at first, but he wanted this for several reasons. First, maybe the South would reciprocate and treat Union prisoners with the same respect. Fat chance, but you can't blame a guy for trying. Maybe even more importantly, Lincoln was playing the long game. Under his view, these were, let's say, lapsed Americans, who would, if he was victorious, become Americans again. You don't want to mistreat folks you hope to bring back into society and willingly remain there. And that brings us to Warwick, Crenshaw, Hiawatha, and Briante. These were 4 ships captured during the blockade and brought forth by the United States as prizes, as is legally required. All 4 prizes were contested. Some of the ships claimed to be ignorant of the blockade and hostilities, which is probably pretty likely, considering this is pre-Facebook. Some of the ships were owned by foreigners. One, even though it was owned by someone in Richmond, was flying the grand old American flag when it was captured and claimed to have no idea that there was war brewing. Each of the 4 ships represented a different question of notice, ownership, and intent. All of them challenged the government's power to take them as prizes, and the case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court in what became known as the prize cases. So what were the stakes here? If the court declared Lincoln's actions illegal, the entirety of the legal foundation upon which the early actions in the Civil War were built would collapse. Yes, Congress eventually did step in and authorize the use of force, but what about actions Lincoln took unilaterally? What happens to support for a war when a leader is found to have acted without legal authority in that war? Ruling against Lincoln entirely was definitely the worst case scenario. But there was another more subtle outcome that was almost as bad. The court ruling in favor of Lincoln on the basis that the blockade was part of an actual war, legitimizing the Confederacy as a hostile foreign power and lending weight to its diplomatic and treaties with Europe. Either outcome might have been disastrous for the Union, but it's also worth noting that a win for Lincoln would be an unprecedented expansion of presidential authority, one that hadn't yet come before the court. The stakes were high no matter what direction the court took. Luckily for Lincoln, and by extension the Union, the Southern enslaved, us, etc. on down the line, the Supreme Court in 1863 found a way to look at it through Lincoln's lens. Sure, the opinion went, it's kind of a war. There are belligerents, even if there is no formal declared war. Now you can just imagine Lincoln reading through that part of the opinion and starting to get a sinking feeling. But the opinion went, insurgents can be belligerents too. A civil war is a different kind of war. It can be both a real war with belligerent soldiers to capture, but it's also inherently an insurgency. Lincoln didn't go to war, the war came to him, and he was forced to meet it on its own terms and in his own way. It's not just the power, the court reasoned, but the duty of the president to protect the nation until Congress can act. Whether the president, in fulfilling his duties as commander-in-chief in suppressing an insurrection, has met with such armed hostile resistance and a civil war of such alarming proportions as will compel him to accord to them the character of belligerents is a question to be decided by him. The court essentially gave us the concept of Schrodinger's war. Lincoln had the authority to treat it as a war when he deemed it necessary, but it could also be merely an insurrection because that's what civil wars are. No need to make it formal. They split the difference, giving Lincoln a total victory. The case greatly expanded the president's authority to take action against threats to the country, authority that has been used to the hilt the past few decades and such. So much so, in fact, that Congress moved to rein it in 1973 with the War Powers Act. So the court rules in his favor, Lincoln wins, his actions are all deemed legally justified, and we go on to win the Civil War. So it's a big deal. It may even seem trivial that there was a dissenting opinion in the prize cases, especially when the dissent agreed that the blockade was legal. That view was unanimous. The dissent, however, would have boldly proclaimed that this was a true formal war, declared or no, which would then define the Confederacy as a full government. Even if that would give it diplomatic credibility to seek help from foreign governments at a time when the outcome of the Civil War was anything but certain. This could have been the result that changed the entire trajectory of the war. And what really should scare you is how close it came. If you've ever doubted the power of one person to change history, know that the decision in the prize cases was a split of 5 votes to 4. All of modern American history may have come down to one person's vote. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds are made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to talk about how good it feels to hear the words Abraham Lincoln again? Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on this show can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America. Whether the president, in fulfilling his duties as commander-in-chief and suppressing an election, whether the president, in fulfilling his duties as commander-in-chief, is suppressing